Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Rennebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs Mental Health on the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I am Todd Rennebaum. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and whatever you celebrate. I hope you're having a great time, and I hope you're having a great time with friends and family. And I'm doing this intro and outro today on Christmas Day so that I can get the episode out tomorrow. It's a day late than normal, but hey, the holiday season, things get crazy. I've had an interesting week. I found out that Bunny Hugs and Mental Health is on the top 10 list of best Canadian mental health podcasts. It's sitting at number 7, so thank you for that. And thank you for all the guests and everyone that listens. It's really cool that happened. I passionately believe that this podcast can help people, does help people, so please share, follow on Facebook at Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, or you can go to Instagram, Daddy Cries Book on Instagram, so you can follow there. Now, speaking of families and holidays and stuff, my guest this week, her name is Jessica Seffelaar-Nagy, and she's going to talk about her mother. Her mother was severely mentally ill when Jessica was younger. She found out later that she was diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia. So she talks about the harrowing time as a kid growing up with that and watching her mom go through that, having to go through foster care at times. And then she talks about her own mental illnesses and her mental health issues and how that's going for her and what she's diagnosed with and stuff. And it's all really, really interesting, and it's a great story. And it's an inspiring story, so I hope you enjoy that. So, without further ado, I give you Jessica.
Kind of how I interpret it and how I tell people is that my mom had a stalker. And her stalker was her mental health. So my dad and my mom were together for many years, and they had myself, rumor has it that it was through rape, because she was working with him and he just pulled into a back lane, like a back road, and ended up raping her, and she became pregnant with me. And it was a very abusive relationship. She was very submissive. I remember a lot of the abuse that was going on. A cleaver being thrown at her head because she cut a tomato wrong, him yelling at her, demeaning her. I was 5 and I could still remember that. Mm-hmm. So they ran restaurants together. Mom and dad worked all the time, and we rarely saw them. So we were left with a nanny, and then on the weekends a babysitter.
When you say we, you and your brother?
My little brother and I, yeah. Then one day, social services became involved, and they gave my mom a choice that either she leaves or she loses us. So she chose to leave. So slowly she started moving things, out, kind of things that he wouldn't really notice. And then all of a sudden she told him, and we left. And I actually still remember the day driving away. We ended up moving actually to Churchbridge. So we moved around a lot. We moved to Churchbridge due to her having access to a church that was extremely supportive. Her parents were close by, so she was able to get some of that help. And during that time, we were there for about 7 years, 6 or 7 years. I would say 7 years. Her mental health started to really go. It was as though she escaped. She was, from him, kind of, sort of. He was still in our lives, and still very demeaning. And she was going downhill. And I remember growing up, her coming to Regina. She never told us why. We would be left with our uncle, and he would take care of us for a couple of days, and then she would be back. And then one day, she was gone for several weeks, and that was when we start to learn that she had some serious mental health issues. You know, that she would come home and then she'd be back in for 2-3 months. I ended up actually in foster care because my grandparents didn't want to take care of me. So my foster parents, they are the light of my life, even now, still in my life. She was actually my English teacher, or my teacher in general, at the private school that I was in. And they had a foster parent license, and they ended up taking me in. So they lived on a farm. So I actually lived with them for many, many months, and I knew them, which really helped. When that happened, or right after that happened, Mom was planning to move to Indian Head. And it was basically an escape where he would never find us. And at that time, she was in the hospital trying to do this. So my little brother was staying with my grandparents at our duplex, and I was staying with these foster parents and basically having the time of my life because they were utterly amazing, and they still are today. So she left and moved to Indian Head before we did. So once she was discharged, she packed up everything and off she went to Indian Head. She stayed there for a month before we actually followed her. I don't know what the reasoning why was to that, but that's how it worked. Dad didn't know where we were going, what was happening, nothing. During this period of time, before we moved to Indian Head, we had found out that he had actually been married to a woman in Hong Kong and had a daughter with this woman. Yeah, it was pretty insane. So I think that really broke Mom as well, because his wife wanted him to have nothing to do with us. So just for awareness, my dad is a very traditional Chinese man who, you know, his wife is very based on tradition and everything as well, I believe. She absolutely refuses to have anything to do with us, even to this day. But anyways, we got to Indian Head, and that's where it all hit rock bottom. A lot of people in Indian Head didn't realize what was happening in our home. A couple of the teachers did at the high school. I still thank God every day that I had a couple of these teachers because they were my sanity. Mom started to basically try and kill herself. So she sliced her wrists, and in front of me, I would hide that from my brother. So I would rush home from school. So obviously we lived, you know, both you and I lived a block away from the schools each way. I would literally run from school and beat my brother to the house to make sure that he wasn't going to be walking into the home with something that he should not be seeing. He's 2 years younger than me. I was trying to protect him.
How old were you at the time?
At that time, I was about 14. I would say 13, 14. We only lived in Indian Head for about 5 years. If something was going on, I would meet him at the front door and I would say, go across the street to your buddy's place, go play. You know, I'll bring your stuff in. I'll grab you in a little later. There were times I would walk in, she'd be sitting in her bed or on her bed, and she would have a razor and she'd be twisting it like a straight razor. She'd be playing with it, and she would literally go to cut herself. And those were times that I would call the RCs, and they would come, and it was basically suicide watch for me. By that time, my dad had found out where we were. So he actually showed up at the high school, just out of the blue, walked into our grade 7 class when we were having lunch. And that was it. So even my bullies at that time were like freaking out, and they knew something was going on because I was telling people, like, go to my mom's place, go to my house, go tell my mom. So even my bullies were quite concerned on what's happening. Is she okay? Is she in danger? So that made a big, huge impact.
I'm curious who your bullies are, but you can tell me later.
I'll tell you later. I'm not going to do that publicly. That's just cruel, and it's the past. The past is the past, right?
Yeah.
So she ended up in the hospital by the end of us being in Indian Head for almost a year in psychosis. She was going from manias to depression. She was under one of our top psychiatrists that we had at that time here in Saskatchewan. And he was doing his best to keep her stable. He was trying to make sure that we were okay. I had my grandfather who would drive in on the weekends to Indian Head from Regina, who was also dealing with cancer treatment for lung cancer. And he would bring us groceries, and he would, make sure the bills were paid and everything while my mom was in the hospital. So essentially my brother and I were living on our own for almost a year.
Wow. Yeah, like I lived 2 doors down. You were pretty much right behind me. I had like no idea.
Yeah,
not that we were tight friends or anything, but
we knew each other.
Yeah, but yeah, that's wild to me. So what was she diagnosed with, or did you know at that point?
At that point, we still didn't know. They were treating her with antipsychotics. They were treating her with antidepressants. And then they let her go. She came home and she tried to kill herself again. Well, by that point, the mental health system was completely backed up, really bad by that point, and they were unable to take her in. So it was a decision on her part, as well as I suspect her psychiatrist's part, that she moved to Regina. By then, it was common sense because I was coming to Regina every weekend because at that time I was an international model. So I was working almost every weekend here in Regina doing photo shoots and everything. And it just made more sense for her to be closer to the physicians and everything. And that's kind of where I'm seeing it. So we moved to Regina, and literally 2 weeks after we moved, my brother had just left for BC to spend the summer with my aunt and uncle. And she picked up a razor and she sliced her wrists from wrist all the way down. Both of them, right in front of me. I was 16 years old. I was living in a city. I had never lived in a city before. And on top of it, in a city that I didn't know anybody besides my grandfather. I ended up having to call 911. They took her away. It was, and when I say stalker, it was almost like she had this shadow behind her all the time trying to engulf her, and at that point, it had gotten her. So I had called her psychiatrist. I actually had his personal number by that point. And I had called him and said, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't do this. I'm done. I can't. And he just told me, he said, just, it's okay. We're going to try and deal with this. So, okay. Well, I ended up meeting him and the social worker for the psych ward there at the hospital. And they were trying to deal with what's going on with my mom, plus making sure that I was okay, because by that point, I'm 16. I'm completely lost in my life by that point because I've been dealing with this for so long. And I'm sure by that point, I had a lot of mental health issues that we just weren't focusing on. We were too busy trying to make sure my mom was still staying alive.
If nothing else, you had a lot of trauma.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they gave a choice. well, actually, it wasn't even really a choice. It was the physician had looked at me and said, I can't do anything more for her. This is too deep. This is too intense. And that's a huge thing for him to say. It was an extremely huge thing for him to say. So they suggested that she go to North Battleford, to the mental health hospital there. Minimum stay was 2 years. They said she would probably be there 3. So she went. I signed off because I was 16. I was capable of doing that, of saying, yes, she can go. I remember distinctively walking into the room where she was here in Regina before she left. And she was in restraints. She's smiling and laughing. She didn't even know who I was. She had no idea. She was gone, completely gone. So yeah, she went to North Battleford. She spent 6 months in basically the isolation room where it was basically a bed. And that was it. She was locked up in there for 6 months. I wasn't allowed to see her. I wasn't allowed to talk to her.
What? Why weren't you guys allowed to have any communication?
For those 6 months, because she was just completely gone. She would have never known who I was or anything. Once they start finding that she was coming out of psychosis, she was transferred to what's known as a lockdown ward. So the lockdown ward is where they're able to wear their own clothes with reason. But if they leave the ward at any time, they are escorted by 1 to 2 nurses. And it's for the protection of the public as well as protection of that patient because they're at such a high risk. So at that time, I was able to go visit her. In between this time of her being in North Battleford, I'm paying the mortgage, the bills, trying to at least get through grade 11. And keep in mind, I actually really very much struggled and I passed by the skin of my teeth. I actually think they mercy passed me.
And your brother was in BC at this point?
My brother stayed in BC. Well, he came back and then we sent him back to BC because it was better for him. There was no way that there could be stability for him at that point, that somebody needed to deal with the house and everything, and it was left all on my shoulders. So I finished grade 11 and I didn't go back. I didn't go back to school. I couldn't deal with everything that was going on in my life, in my head, and school all at the same time. It was too great. So I went and visited her and it was intense. Like, it was interesting. That hospital at that time, I don't know how it is now. Then it was incredible. The services that they provided for the patient, for the family, it was absolutely incredible. They even made sure that we had a place to stay right on the grounds so I could be close to her. They provided the groceries while I was there. I had openness to visit her anytime I wanted during the entire time I was there. If we wanted to do an outing, I had to make sure that I was arranging it. I could see when I saw her that first time, she was doing so much better. There was a light.
Did she know who you were at that point?
She did know who I was. She was a little lost in time. She kept thinking that I was still in grade 10, all this kind of stuff. So it was a matter of trying to get her to be more in tune of where we are now at that present time. So, of course, you would expect it. 16-year-old, they're going to rebel. By then I was 17. I rebelled. I started drinking, partying, hanging out with the not so good people. And my own, stalker basically started to take heed, take head. of my life. And one night I had decided that, I heard about this sober dance thing at a Eureka Club is what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, I'll go with a couple of friends. So we went, and that's actually where I met one of my best friends who actually introduced me to my husband. It was crazy because there was a group of 5 of us and we just became close. We were there for each other. So that was my husband, his best friend, his cousin, who's my best friend, Chats, and Tawny, and, all these people. And it was as though we supported each other, and they knew what was happening. They knew the extent of it. They helped me through all those depression phases I was having because I was trying to deal with everything all at once. But Mom came home.
After the 3 years?
2 years, actually. She had 2 years. So what they did was, when they felt that she was ready, they transitioned her to like a home-like sort of situation. And they helped her transition to that because she had been locked up for so long, right? Not because she's a bad person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, she was a danger to herself. Before she was able to come home and be released, they actually did 2 trips down here, and she had 2 escorts. One stayed with her and the other one stayed close by. And she actually stayed at the house. She was quite mortified on how dirty the house was. Well, teenager. Didn't really know how to clean properly, whatever.
Fair enough.
Yeah, they did this twice, and when they felt that she could handle it, they allowed her to come home permanently. I think that was the greatest defeat that she had ever had. And it was the first time that I can remember that I actually had a mom that I didn't have to watch all the time and be fearful. It took me a while to really get over that and be trustworthy of her, to be alone and, to be okay, for me not to hide the knives or anything like that.
So at this point, was she then, like, they must have, like, diagnosed her and given her meds that were actually working and things like that at this point?
Yeah. So her diagnosis was bipolar type 1 and paranoid schizophrenia. Pretty heavy duty diagnoses.
Yeah.
Definitely very hard to control, both of those type of diagnosis. She ended up taking 56 pills a day.
What?
56 pills a day just to stay stable.
Good God.
Yeah.
I should feel too bad that I take 3.
Right?
Or 2, I guess. I don't know what I take. Doesn't matter.
I can't even keep track of what I take anymore.
56.
Yeah, 56 pills.
That's a meal.
It is a meal. Totally.
Lord.
Totally is a meal. Yeah. Not types of medication, just, pills, the amount. Yeah. Right? I think there was like 8 different meds, 6 different meds, something like that.
Huh.
Yeah. So, yeah, once she came home and I realized that she was okay and stable, I went back to school.
Huh.
So my best friend was actually going to what was called a quiet high. And it was through the Catholic school system. It was called St. Luke's School. She suggested that I try and enroll there. So I enrolled. They were a little skeptical on taking me. But when I explained kind of all the trauma, everything that was going on, they decided, yeah, you need to be here. So that's where I went. I went there for 1 year, finished my high school. It's actually where I met Ranteed.
Ranteed.
Yeah, Ranteed. He was the biggest support, my biggest cheerleader. He knew the trauma that I had gone through, that I was trying to get through.
Mm-hmm.
He was, I mean, I can't say enough about him. He's amazing. And even to this day, every time we see each other, we're just like, okay, hug, because that's just how it's always been.
Were
I
you
remember him.
sorry? Were you using drugs and alcohol at this point too? Like, was he kind of counseling you?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. So I was just my depression, my trauma, essentially anxiety, everything was just going out of control, and I couldn't take control of it anymore. Because by that point, mom was good. Now it was my turn. So he had helped me actually to finish school. To actually, I ended up getting into pre-med, didn't take the scholarship, much to my father's horror. How it is.
So you actually got a scholarship to go to med school?
I did. So I graduated with like a 97 average.
Lord.
So I went from basically failing to going through the roof with my grades.
Huh.
Yeah. So I was actually going to school. So St. Luke's School at that point, at that time, you would go to school in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
and at 12, or I think it's 12:30, then you'd be done for the day, and then you can do whatever you want. So I was actually working as well. So I was working full time in retail.
Oh.
I was getting my schoolwork done. I was focused on what I wanted to do.
So yeah, that would like I know in Asian culture, I have lots of Asian friends. That would be it's devastating. It's like, wait, you could be a doctor and I don't have to pay?
Yeah, that was. We still discuss this, especially now that my daughter is in university. She's taking French education with a major in chemistry, and he's a little horrified that she's not going for medicine. So he keeps telling her, "Well, we can always change your study to, I don't know, lawyer or doctor." I'm like, oh, he's like, you don't want to be like your mom. I'm like, oh, knife, stab, twist.
So you have a relationship with your dad still. Well, actually, we'll lead up to that. So your mom's home, you're working, you're finished grade 12.
Finished grade 12, and I was working during the summer after school. I was the dummy and decided to continue rebelling. And I met a guy who, my husband's going to laugh. He was working with Conklin. So Conklin, if you remember correctly, was the fair.
You're right. Carney.
A carney. Yeah, I met a carney. And I got pregnant. So yeah, I always tell my son that, you were the biggest prize I ever got at the fair.
Ah, I love it.
Whatever. So yeah, that kind of changed everything for me. I gave up my scholarship. I applied for nursing. At that point, he was supposed to be going up for adoption. I wanted to put him up for adoption. I felt that I couldn't be a single mom because his biological father is a drug user, an addict, and I didn't want him involved. And I actually never really approached him to tell him I was pregnant. I know he knew that I was pregnant, but he didn't ever do anything or say anything to me about it. Yeah, it was pretty intense. But, when I had him, it was as though things changed, and I couldn't hand him over to somebody. He was mine and mine alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept him. And there are days that I wish I didn't.
Oh.
Especially lately, but that's okay.
Oh.
We're but yeah, I kept him, and I ended up going to nursing school. I started nursing school. He was about 2 weeks old when I started. But that's when my own stalker started to come. We had known that there was that risk because we all know that mental health a lot of times can be very genetic.
Mm-hmm.
But throw in the trauma that I had gone through. Well, Hoorah, it's coming.
Yeah. I mean, nature versus nurture versus nature, and it's you get a little both there.
Oh, exactly. And it wasn't that my mom didn't love me. She didn't love, you know, she loved both my brother and I. She did what she could, but she couldn't help that she got sick. At that time, I was very angry about it, but now I understand. So I was about 3 weeks away from my nursing graduation. So I was in the last year, the 10-month program for the practical nursing program. And then it was going to move on to a year and a half. 3 weeks away, 3 weeks away from grad. And I hit rock bottom. It got to the point where I was envisioning myself harming my child, harming myself. I couldn't get out of that slump. By then, my husband and I were dating, and we had been friends for a very long time already. So it wasn't that we didn't know each other. It was that at that point, he was trying to know a person that he didn't know anymore. Because I had changed personally, in personality so much because of what was happening in my head.
Could part of this be postpartum too?
Well, and here's the funny thing. They actually diagnosed me with postpartum. And then the meds weren't working. And they said, oh, maybe it's major depressive disorder. So I ended up in the hospital for about a month. It was about a month. And then they let me go. And they told me I had to stay stable for a while. And then, I could start school again. Okay, fine, whatever. Well, then I go and get pregnant again.
That'll keep you stable.
Yeah. Well, by then my husband and I were engaged, and I got pregnant. And we were planning our wedding for the following spring. Well, ended up being, nope, it's happening. This fall, it's happening. So I actually ended up back in the hospital to get off my meds because of the danger to the unborn fetus. And they needed to do it under supervision because I was still very rocky. So I planned my wedding from that hospital with nurses that had taken care of my mom.
Right.
It was so surreal because these nurses watched me grow up, literally watched me grow up. I remember going in the first time and my mom's doctor coming onto the ward, and I'm in the common area sitting there doing a puzzle with one of the nurses. And he looks at me and he just comes up to me, gives me a hug, and he said, I knew you were going to be here one day.
Do you mind me asking what doctor it was?
Dr. Charles Messer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I remember looking at him and saying, and you couldn't tell me? You could have prepared me for this.
You could have given me a timeline.
Yeah, exactly. Giving me a timeline at least, give me like a schedule. So he knew I was going to come. It was just a matter of time. I was horrified, but I was trying to be a single mom, and my mom was taking care of my son. The deal was that if I went to college, she would help me take care of him. And if I didn't, then I had to move out and I had to do it on my own. So she actually gave me that chance to do my post-secondary, education and everything. And I'm so grateful for her at that point because she was stable. It was the first time in her life that she had been completely stable and was able to do things without me having to worry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by that point, she ended up having to help me. She was teaching me coping skills and everything. And when she realized that they were misdiagnosing me, she actually demanded to have the physician that was taking care of me. And by that point, it was at that time where psychiatrists were like changing all the time. I had gone through 5 psychiatrists in 2 years because they would come and then they would leave, and then they would come and then they would leave.
Yeah.
So I never had a consistency in care. Well, finally, my mom got fed up because I was going from one end to the other. And she just said enough. She talked with the physician that was taking care of me at that time. And she told him, you need access to my files. You need to know what the background is. They were able to get that. They spoke with my mom's physician with her permission. And they realized that I was displaying a lot of the symptomology that she had early on. And that was when I started to move forward with diagnoses. That was when they realized that the antidepressants were actually pushing me into a manic phase. And then I would all of a sudden crash. So, and when I crash hard, really, really hard.
So then they diagnosed you with the same thing your mom has?
So I actually am diagnosed now with bipolar type 1 and schizoaffective disorder. So a little bit different. So once I start going into those highs, that's when the schizophrenia starts to take effect, where I start to hear voices and I start to hear things that aren't really happening, lots of delusionals. So
when you're on your high, in your
manic, when I'm on my high.
So for your mom, was it just all the time then? Because it
was all the time.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
Yeah, hers was all the time, and it was completely paranoid. Like she would see and hear things that weren't really there all the time.
Oh, okay, so you're a little less paranoid then?
I'm a little less paranoid. I think I'm a little bit more fun.
But when you are having psychosis and stuff, is it not a paranoid psychosis? It's just
It's not a paranoid psychosis. It's more of affective to the bipolar disorder.
Gotcha. Oh, I see.
It's hard to explain. Yeah. Essentially what happens is I go into that high, I start to hear those voices and everything, and I realize that, oh my God, I'm in psychosis or I'm going into psychosis. I need to do something about this quick. A lot of people don't have that self-awareness. For myself, the reason why I have that self-awareness is because of everything that my mom went through. When I was diagnosed, I swore that I would never, ever put my children through what I had to go through. And I struggled for many, many years. I struggled. And then about a year before my mom died, she was quite sick and in the hospital, and it didn't have anything to do with her mental health. It was her body in general. I had wrote my dad because I came to the realization that I needed to confront him. But I couldn't do it face to face, and I couldn't do it verbally. I was too scared. So I wrote a letter and I mailed it to him. And I didn't talk to him for for a very long time. When we had to contact him and tell him my mom was dying, he actually came down. He met his grandchildren for the first time. By then, my youngest had been born. My oldest was 6. He had never met his grandchildren, ever.
Where was he living at this point?
So Brandon, Manitoba. After all that, after the confrontation with him, and I mean, we talked about it, and he's like, well, I didn't really appreciate that letter. And I said, well, I needed to do it. That was for me. I'm trying to tell you how I feel and what the truth is, and, whatever. And he just said, okay, that's fine. After that, it was as though that weight had been lifted and I was able to go on and heal. Mm-hmm. I started learning about my tells. I started learning about my medication, how to adjust it when I need it. Because I became to that point where my psychiatrist was like, okay, you can adjust your medication as maximum this, minimum this. Okay, perfect, fine. Any big issue, give me a call. Perfect. The reason being is because I know what my tells are. I know that my seasons can be very precise. So right now I'm starting to get into my big season where I'm going to start having to adjust a little bit and start really doing self-awareness.
When you say seasons, is it like actual, like the weather seasons that kind of affect it?
It's actually weather. Absolutely. It's actually weather season. And holidays like Christmas. I don't know why. Christmas is always really tough. And I think Christmas is tough for a lot of people because it is about family. It's about being there for one another and stuff. So when you're dealing with harm reduction stuff, that's a huge thing, and you're always on the watch for falls and making sure that they're prepared and that you're prepared to help them through that. Spring, when the snow melts, my absolute worst.
Really?
Absolute worst time. Yeah. So I've been stable, I'm going to say, for probably about, for the most part, 15 years. I did have a little blip about I'd say about 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
Me too.
I think it was at around the same time. We were all just falling off the cliff there.
It's when Trump was elected.
Sorry?
It was when Trump was elected.
Yeah, I think it was around that time.
That's why. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, there we go. We'll blame it on Trump.
Thanks, Trump.
So by that point, I had graduated from practical nursing. My daughter was 8 months old. My husband and I were married. So we had in total 4 children. Actually, technically, we have 6 children. I lost a daughter 18 years ago.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, that kind of hits me too a little bit, but you deal. So, yeah.
Not that not that you can compare traumas and compare pain, but sometimes I can't help it, right? When I hear other people's stories, it's like, damn, mine sounds stupid compared to theirs,
Nobody, you know what? Nobody's background is stupid. Everybody has their own story.
Yeah, I know, but still, I can't help but do it for a split second that I remember, oh yeah, right. Pain is pain, trauma is trauma.
I had worked in Wascana Rehab for a few years, and then I had worked in a couple of other places. And that was when my own firstborn son, because we're a blended family, was diagnosed with autism. And that's when I walked away and said, I'm done nursing. I need to stay home with him. I need to make sure he's getting his therapy. He is not going to let society overtake him. He needs to learn how to integrate into society. So that was my goal. So I actually gave up nursing for him. And then I ended up signing in for social work. Social work degree through Athabasca University, so online. Got it done. But because of that, I lost my licensing through CELPN. CELPN has certain policies, and they require a certain amount of hours worked per year. And I wasn't able to meet that because I, again, felt like my son deserved more and deserved better than that.
You like sacrificing yourself for other people, it sounds like.
I'm horrible. I'm so horrible.
I mean, I get it, right? It's your mom and your child. So it's not like just some random person, but yeah.
Well, after a few years, and once he was okay and doing well and everything, and once my youngest, who's 16 now, once he got into school full time, I started looking for a job. I knew I wanted to do something medicine because I wanted to use that brain of mine, right? I had been keeping up with everything, reading up on things and trying to do, as much learning as possible throughout all this time. So I ended up getting a job at a medical clinic as a manager. That was when I was exposed to harm reduction. Scared the crap out of me. I am not kidding. I was so terrified of these people. I was like, what? No, I am not. No. Oh my God. Todd, I fell in love. I fell in love with these people, and the courage and the strength that they had with them trying to get the help that they need and do the things that they needed to do to stay stable. It was an incredible turnaround. Well, once word got out, so patients were starting to talk. They were talking to other harm reduction physicians and everything about who I was and where they had been before and how, they have to switch because it's closer, this new clinic's closer to them and everything. All of a sudden, I get a call from my old family physician out of the blue. Hadn't heard from him in years. Here he had opened up a harm reduction program, and he wanted somebody with the experience. He wanted somebody with a medical background, and I ended up joining him. I managed that program for 4.5 years, 5 years, about that, 5 years, 300 patients, a whole lot of drama, but a whole lot of love. I was in my niche. I learned that I was totally in my niche. But during that time, that was when I had my blip. So we were actually in the middle of our reduction clinic, and I'm in the same room as the doctor, and I'm right behind him, and I'm listening and taking notes so that I know what's going on, because my job was to check in with the patients every day. If they needed something or they just needed somebody to talk to, I was their go-to person. So they would always come. And a lot of times there were ones that would come in and say, I just need a hug. Okay, here's a hug. Do you want coffee? Just things like that. It was about, my job was to open them up, dig around, find all that trauma so that we can deal with it, any other issues that may be going on, and work with them on how to cope while still trying to, reach their sobriety. And then make sure that they're closed right up again before they leave my office, because I don't want them breaking and falling apart out there, right?
Right, yeah.
If they're going to break and fall apart, I want them to do it with me, right? So that we can work on things. We're in with a patient, very well-known patient of ours, super sweetheart. And I'm behind the doctor taking notes and everything. And I'm looking up thinking, I'm hearing something. Started hearing voices. So I knew that I was on a rocky path. At that point, I was adjusting my meds as fit. And I thought I was okay. And then all of a sudden, it hit me like a brick. I started hearing the same voices that I had been hearing for many, many years, off and on. So I'm sitting there and I'm in tears, trying not to cry in front of this patient who has enough in their life to deal with. She was about to leave, and the routine was I give them a hug before they leave. And she came and she hugged me. She goes, "Are you okay?" I said, "I will be. You just worry about yourself." She's like, "Okay." She goes, "I'm here if you need me." And I said, "I know you are." And I said, "I am here if you need me." So she walked out, and the doctor looked at me and said, "Okay, next patient." And I remember closing the door and looking at him and going, "I am the next patient. I'm going into psychosis. I need an adjustment. I need it now." So at that time, the mental health system was actually changing. There were specific doctors that were being switched from community and hospital to just hospital or just community. My psychiatrist was chosen for hospital. I had no psychiatrist. Thank God we had a psychiatrist on site. So we literally bombarded his office. We shut down our harm reduction clinic for the day. I remember the doctor saying, "We have to, because you're the heartbeat of this place." And we bombarded the psychiatrist's office, and he adjusted my meds. He called my old psychiatrist. They talked. We tried to figure things out, got an urgent referral through, and I was under strict instructions. You can only work a certain amount of hours a day. Maybe you should take some time off, which I said no, because if I take time off, I'm going to be sent home and wallowing in this, and I can't do that. I need to stay in routine. I need to stay focused. This is how it's going to work. So we made up a routine for the day. When I had to take breaks, because my breaks were never scheduled, it was whenever I could get it.
Right.
Kept on going through my day. So, but adjustment meds and everything, that was the last time that I've actually had that blip. That took me about 6 months, 7 months to get out of. And even after, I was still very rocky.
Right. Yeah, it's weird relapses. I've had a few this last year with COVID and stuff, and not so much, more anxiety and panic attack more than like I'm still sober. I haven't relapsed from my sobriety or even depression, but yeah, my anxiety's been really amped up, and it's so scary because it's like, oh God, this time it's going to take for good, or oh my God, you remember where you were, how low it can get. And so, yeah, it's completely startling. But at the same time, I'm also way more proactive. Like when I do start to feel the signs, like you say, you're like, you're on it right away because you know how bad it can get. And
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like you don't want that to be you again. You
yeah,
remember, and you don't want that to be you again. You want to be able to keep on moving forward.
yeah.
The biggest thing that I have found with the mental health system is lack. It took me, it took 7 or 8 months for me to actually get in to see a regular psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when I did, I saw him a couple of times, and then I ended up having to miss an appointment because I ended up having to stay late because we had a patient in acute distress. And I didn't have a chance to call the office, say, I can't come, like this has happened. I can't see that psychiatrist anymore.
Because you missed an appointment?
Because I missed an appointment, and because they state that I have to pay $250 for that missed appointment.
Yay.
And I refuse to pay that.
Yeah.
Absolutely refuse to pay that. There needs to be an understanding with mental health that, there's going to be times where we're not going to be able to get ourselves out of bed to go to that appointment.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen because we're in relapse and we're struggling and dealing with other things and stuff. And I understand it's wasting the physician's time, but I think something that these physicians need to do is start adding in, okay, this patient hasn't arrived. We should call them and check on them, make sure they're okay.
Mm-hmm. I know my psychiatrist's office, they'll call me the day before to remind me. So at least then they can have if I am, well, one to remind me, but also if I'm going through something and I can't make it, then at least, they have an idea where I am the day before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and mine does the same. Like I have a different one now, and mine's the same as well. She calls ahead of time, and I know the one day I couldn't make it because I had lakefront property, so it was during that big giant rainfall, so I couldn't get out of my house.
Mm.
It was pretty bad.
Actually, I don't know if I've ever mentioned my doctor's name on here before, but it's oh crap, what the hell is his name? Dr. Natarajan. That's who it is.
Me too.
Yeah? Well, you said she.
Well, his receptionist, she.
Oh, I see. Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. He's the only one I've ever had. I met him in hospital. So then when they did that switch that you said, he's now in the community. So I was able to keep the same doctor.
Which is awesome. Definitely awesome. I miss my old psychiatrist. I absolutely loved her. I had her from the time that she started here in Saskatchewan.
Hmm.
And I was pretty horrified when they said that they were switching her. I was like, no, can't switch her. Because I miss her. She was amazing. I remember her telling me that, I'm just going to refer you back to your physician. You can follow up with him. And I said, are you crazy? No, I will come see you once a year if that's what it takes. She's like, but you're stable. I don't care.
That's how I want to keep it. So how are you doing today? Like, are you working today? Are you doing stuff?
So I'm doing awesome. Of course, I still have my good days and my bad. COVID has definitely not been gentle.
Yeah.
Being in frontline health. So right now I'm working as a pharmacy technician at one of the shoppers here in Regina. And then I also work as a care coordinator with Lumica. And now I'm also doing testing sites as well. So rapid antigen testing sites. So I'm doing 3 things at once. I'm sure my old physician would be horrified, but at the same time, sitting back and going, okay, because I remember her telling me that for someone who has the type of diagnoses that I have, and for someone who has been in the psych ward 5 times, on suicide watch, I should not be working full time. I should only be working part time. And that she was absolutely amazed that I was able to do it and able to handle it.
Yeah,
There are definitely days where I just don't want to get up. I force myself to keep on going and do the things I need to do. If it means that I'm just getting out of bed and I'm not doing the housework, yeah, so be it.
Yeah, I think I've just realized in the last little while here that I don't know if I can work full time. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's like, because yeah, it's tough, especially as a man, because it's like you want to be this provider and all this stuff, and yeah, like it took me a while just to even kind of tiptoe around it with my wife, even even though she knows what I'm like and stuff. It's like I don't know if I can handle a full time job. Like, I'm not stupid. I'm not lazy. I'm not, any of those things. But for some reason, anytime I have a full-time job, it's like at some point I have a panic attack and then I'm on leave for 2 months anyway for.
It's almost like it's pushing you to that edge.
Yeah. And it's like, so then, the cycle continues then. So then I beat myself up because why can't I be like normal people? Why can't I handle a job? Why can't I do this? And then, then.
Wait, whoa. There's no such thing as normal.
No, I know. Oh, I know that, right? But that's the spiral thinking, right? And when I feel good, I know all that stuff, right? It's like, but when you're in the thick of it, I still do all the wrong things.
I always say we get into that tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Where we can only see what's in front of us. We have no peripheral vision at all.
Yeah.
But once we start to, get better and do better and get to that line where we're doing great or okay, it's all of a sudden it's like that vision just sort of widens. We get that peripheral vision.
Right.
So, I mean, the way that I describe it to people too is that, oh, well, I have a stalker. So this is kind of where this is coming from. I have a stalker and he's always around. He's behind me. He's in front of me. He's above me. He's everywhere around me. And he's trying to pull me down and trying to get me. And when I go into psychosis, he's got a hold of me. And he's trying to take over me. Mm-hmm. And I'm fighting him and trying not to let him. With my mom, it got to the point where she just didn't have a choice.
Right.
And he overtook her. But I always tell people I have that shadow right there. It's there and it's watching and it's waiting to take me down. And I absolutely refuse. So now my son, my oldest, the one that has autism, mm-hmm. He was actually diagnosed 2 weeks ago with bipolar type 2. Reason being, he gets into manics, but mainly depression. And then on top of it, throw in the autism. There's been a lot of issues with access to mental health for him. Definitely a lot of issues with the law. Unfortunately, he's got some charges against him and everything that we are dealing with and he's dealing with. But now that he's on medication, he's on injection and oral meds. I have never seen him so stable like I do now.
Nice.
He's doing better. He's there for his children because, he does have 2 kids.
You're a grandma.
I know, right? I'm a grandma. I became a grandma on my 40th birthday. My firstborn grandson, born on my 40th birthday.
Oh, that's cool. You share a birthday. I actually interviewed a family. He's a 21-year-old kid. Well, a 21-year-old man. And he has autism, and so I talked. So I interviewed him about mental health issues, having autism, and then I also talked to his parents about the difficulties of the mental health issues involved in being a parent of someone with autism. So yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Promote another episode.
It is insane. Like, you can't get access. It's so hard to get access for these kids. And then you throw into it, other mental health. And we know that mental health is a triangle. There's always that top diagnosis, and then we have the two, diagnoses underneath that is underlying with that top one. With him, it would be the autism, and then, down, it's going to be the bipolar. And, he's probably got something else in there, but we're just a little unsure on what it is as of yet.
Right, like OCD or ADD or something.
Yeah, well, I know he's got sensory perception. He has a very hard time with sounds and certain touches and everything.
Yeah, me too, man. And I don't know. I've been thinking about.
Well, that's crazy because you're an artist, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know if I've been thinking lately, like, maybe I should get or check to see if I have ADD or OCD, or because like I read the symptoms and it's like I relate to a lot of it, but some of the major things I don't. So it's like, I don't know why I even need basically it all boils down to anxiety, right? Anyway, so as long as I'm doing things for my anxiety, then I guess it doesn't matter what's causing the anxiety, what the diagnosis is, as long as I don't know.
I think it's about balancing it too.
Yeah.
Like, my daughter has OCD and anxiety and depression. Her OCD she drives me crazy. Like, absolutely insane. She's got to have things a certain way and do things a certain way. And I'm just like, I want to strangle you.
It's not OCD. It's just put it back where I fucking had it.
Exactly. Don't touch it. Stop it. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things I really want people to understand is just because you have a mental health illness or a very severe one, such as my mom or myself, or even, anyone else out there, I want to show people that you can still move forward. You can still be an advocate. You can still be, quote unquote, that normal person. But first, before you do that, you need to learn who you are. Because if you don't know who you are, you're not going to be able to reach that.
No.
I know that I'm that person that has that heart, that has that compassion for medicine and for healthcare, for people, make sure that they're okay. But in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that I'm okay.
Thank you so much for that, Jessica. I really appreciate your being open and honest and your willingness to help others. Now, I talked to her about her mother because I kind of missed it at the end there in the interview. She mentioned she had passed away, but I got some details here. Her mother passed away at 54 years old in June of 2005. Now, her mom was on so many meds and such significant meds that it caused severe weight gain, which then caused diabetes, which then caused kidney failure. She also mentioned losing a daughter in 2003, and she didn't quite make the full-term pregnancy term with her daughter, and she ended up passing away. So there's the details on that, and thanks again, Jessica, for all of this. Now, next week, I am talking to a Canadian celebrity, Michael Landsberg. You might know him from Off the Record on TSN. He used to have a talk show and kind of a round table with different sports celebrities and stuff. He came out with about depression and anxiety and stuff on a show years ago. He's even has a documentary and his own charity called Sick Not Weak. I talked to him about all of this stuff, not next week, but next episode. So stay tuned for that in about 2 weeks' time. So thank you for that, and thank you for this, and happy holidays, everyone. All right. Thank you for listening, and please subscribe, rate, and review however you are listening to this podcast. It only takes a moment, and it really helps the show out with getting noticed. This episode has been sponsored by Penny University Bookstore, 3104 13th Avenue. Call 639-571-2186 and check out their online bookstore at pennyu.ca. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is supported by Connexus. Wellness, however you define it, is achievable. You don't even need to figure it all out by yourself. Talk to Connexus. They'll give you guidance, motivation, and the push you need to reach your goals. They've got you. They're your financial partner, and they know you can achieve your very best, your financial best. Prove them right. Start right at Connexus Credit Union. The Saskatchewan Podcast Network is also sponsored by Direct West. Are you a business owner looking for new avenues to promote your business? Direct West digital billboards are a great opportunity to highlight a new product, new promotion, or anything else you'd like your customers to know about. You can get local, expert marketing help for your business at directwest.com. If you are having a mental health crisis, please call the Canadian Crisis number at 1-833-456-4566. In Saskatchewan, the mobile crisis team in Prince Albert is 306-764-1011. In Regina, it's 306-525-5333, and in Saskatoon, it's 306-933-6200. Don't forget to check out my children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Sometimes Daddy Cries is told through the eyes of a boy whose father suffers from depression. He sees his dad get sad, rest, and even go to the hospital, all while comparing his father's depression to a physical ailment. Available on Amazon.ca. I'll see you next time. This is Todd Redebaum saying make your beds and take your meds. Bye.